Welcome to this explainer. We're jumping right into the incredible, seriously high-stakes journey of a young boy whose one big decision literally changed the course of football history forever. We're looking at the origin story of Lionel Messi, but specifically, we're focusing on that critical window where his dream almost completely slipped away, only to be saved by a staggering leap of faith. Let's get into it.
I want you to put yourself directly in the shoes of someone crossing the Atlantic Ocean toward a completely uncertain future. Imagine leaving absolutely everything you know behind, heading to a new country with one very clear, very heavy realization hanging over you. Failure simply wasn't an option. The dream of playing professional football was entirely on the line here, and turning back meant abandoning that dream for good.
And the sheer gravity of these stakes, it really comes down to a single number: 13. Lionel Messi was just 13 years old when he left his home, his friends, and literally the only life he'd ever known in Rosario, Argentina. I mean, think about what you were doing at 13. Now imagine packing your bags, standing at an airport, making tearful farewells to your relatives, and flying to a different continent to essentially interview for your entire future. That is the intense reality this young boy and his father faced. Section 1, the call from Spain, a single opportunity.
So word of his extraordinary talent had finally reached Europe, and FC Barcelona offered a trial. But crucially, this was just a trial. There was absolutely no guaranteed contract. His family was making massive, life-altering sacrifices for just one single opportunity. They were risking their entire sense of normalcy for one shot to prove he belonged at the absolute highest level of the sport. You can imagine the immense pressure on this kid. He had a tiny window to show a group of highly skeptical European scouts that the rumors coming out of Argentina were actually true. And man, when he arrived for that very first training session, the physical contrast was just staggering. He was the smallest player on the pitch, by far. But despite his size, he was instantly the hardest player to stop. He just glided past defenders with this untouchable confidence and perfect balance. People described his first touch as magical. The coaches were watching a kid who wasn't intimidated in the slightest. He played as if he had belonged on that European pitch his entire life. Moving into Section 2, the famous napkin contract, securing a star. Because of that magical display we just talked about, the scouts were left utterly speechless. Barcelona's sporting director at the time, Carlos Rexach, knew immediately that he had to secure this young Argentine's future before anyone else in Europe could swoop in. I mean, he saw a generational talent right in front of him and realized there was no way the club could afford to let him leave Spain without some kind of solid commitment. Which brings us to this incredible, famous piece of history. In a moment of sheer desperation mixed with total brilliance, the very first agreement was written out on a simple paper napkin at a restaurant. Whether it was going to hold up in a court of law didn't even matter in that exact second. What mattered was anchoring his path to greatness. That napkin officially communicated to Lionel and his father that Barcelona had found their future star and they were locking him in.
This brings us to Section 3, Sacrifices and New Beginnings, the real cost.
Now, securing the promise on a restaurant napkin was really only step 1. Lionel was actually facing a medical condition called growth hormone deficiency, and as part of their commitment, Barcelona officially agreed to fund his critical medical treatments for this. That was huge. For the first time in years, his dream had genuine, practical hope behind it. The club wasn't just investing in a player, right? They were investing in his physical health and well-being, which fundamentally changed his entire life trajectory. So, with a medical support secured, he officially steps into La Masia, Barcelona's world-renowned youth academy. This was his new proven ground. But entering this famous institution meant facing a completely new, highly competitive, and deeply intimidating world. He was no longer the big fish in a small pond back in Rosario. He was now right in the epicenter of European football development. You know, it's so easy to forget the human element when we talk about these global superstars. Let's take a step back. We are talking about a 13-year-old boy trying to navigate a new language, adapting to a vastly different culture, trying to fit in with new teammates, all while enduring severe, crushing homesickness. He was separated from his mother, his brothers, and his childhood friends. The emotional toll of this isolation was profound, and honestly, there were many days where he deeply questioned if he had made a terrible mistake. Yet, despite those really dark, homesick days, looking at family photos and making emotional calls back home, something magical happened whenever he laced up his boots. The moment he stepped onto the football pitch, all of those doubts completely vanished. The pitch was his sanctuary. The language of football was universal, and in that space,
he didn't feel like a stranger anymore. Football literally became his home away from home.
Section 4. Rise of a Superstar. Dominating the Ranks.
So the quiet, homesick boy from Rosario was about to transform his personal struggles into undeniable dominance. You can really see the incredible momentum building here. We go from that tearful airport farewell on day one to absolutely acing the trial, to the famous napkin agreement, and then dedicating the next few years to systematically conquering every single level of La Masia. It is a true masterclass in turning sacrifice into pure fuel.
And his performances? They totally backed it up, week after week. He was scoring unbelievable goals, providing astonishing assists, and creating these unforgettable moments on the training ground. He was rapidly becoming Barcelona's absolute brightest prospect. But the most fascinating part of all this? He was kind of hiding in plain sight. He was dominating the youth competitions, sure, but the broader football world outside of the club still had absolutely no idea what was about to hit them.
Every single sacrifice, every lonely night missing his family, every grueling training session, and every single medical treatment had brought Lionel one step closer to his ultimate dream. The years of quiet, relentless dedication were finally paying off. The doors of the Barcelona first team, the legendary Camp Nou itself, were finally unlocking for him.
Which brings us right to the precipice of greatness. The biggest stage in world football was waiting. All of this foundation sets up a legendary first-team debut and an unforgettable mentorship and partnership with the great Ronaldinho. These are events that would change the sport permanently. The small boy from Rosario had survived his greatest challenges, and the world was finally about to meet him.
So, the foundation is set. The struggles have been endured, and the napkin is signed and framed in history. But it begs the ultimate question, doesn't it? How exactly does a quiet 13-year-old transition from an academy standout to a global icon who literally takes over the world? Keep that question in mind, because what happens next defies